Welcome to It's Personal, Finance Canada. I'm Christine Conway.
And I'm Cameron Conway.
And this podcast is a very personal look at personal finance in Canada. Welcome to It's Personal Finance Canada. I'm Christine Conway, here with Cameron Conway. And if you're in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, or the Yukon, feel free to find us at braunfinancial.com. Now, this past week, I picked up a book on behavioral economics. And you know what? I'm surprised I haven't done this more often. This one in particular was written by Dan Ariely, Predictably Irrational. And this had a huge amount of appeal for me because not only is Dan a professor, and at the time of the writing, which was 2008 when this was released, he was a professor over at MIT. And he basically used the book as like a giant test with a bunch of his students, willing, of course, that sign proper releases and all of the things that you need to do to prove and disprove some of his behavioral economic theories.
Yeah, another week has come and gone, and it's another week of reading books for free through the library app to kind of figure out another way to explain to you personal finance and go more into like the mentality, the psychology, and the reasons why behind what we do with our money.
Is there any other way? I mean, behavioral economics will talk to you all about the power of free and all about the power, what happens to your mind when you can actually receive value from something like me reading a library book with no perception whatsoever of loss because it didn't cost me any money. So if I didn't like the book, I guess I wasted my time. But hey, in this case, I learned a lot. Highly recommend the book if you have a chance to pick it up. Like I said, it's on the library app for free, at least in British Columbia.
Well, what I was going to say was if you didn't like the book, you just complained about it today instead.
Fair enough. Oh my goodness, eh? But let's talk through the title because this was brilliantly done in my opinion. Economics is all about understanding how we as humans, in theory, make rational decisions about our money, about pricing points, about economic choices. And behavioral economics is that implication that, well, wait a second, maybe we don't. And not only don't we, but we don't make rational choices consistently enough that now it's a whole field of study. And now it's the ability to draw the line and say, hey, you know what? These irrational choices are so consistent that you can predict the outcome. So hence the title, Predictably Irrational. And I thought that was a brilliant play on words.
Yeah, if you're a betting person, always bet against people being rational and well thought out when it comes to money. Well, the quicker you learn that, the more sense the stock market makes.
And the more sense that the basic premise that as humans, we tend to avoid pain at all costs, and pain associated with our money, pain associated with our time, with any element of loss is an incredibly powerful motivator. And it influences how we make our decisions, even when the outcome is not, quote unquote, as we would say, rational.
Would you say then that money is just a pain reduction tool if you really boil it down?
I would say that money is a tool in all contexts, right? Money is exactly what we make it out to be. And I think that our use of money is the more interesting thing that we have to look at, our motivations behind how we use the money, whether it's basic survival, enhancing our lifestyle, keeping up with the Joneses, or anything along those lines. So let's talk about inflation. This is everybody's topic that we love to hate, right? And we experience it on the daily. I mean, I still can't look at our grocery bill without going, oh my goodness, how do we possibly spend this much money this week just feeding our family?
Yeah, it's still hard to walk around the grocery store thinking, oh, a year ago, this was that. Oh, 2 years ago, this cost that. So we won't get too far into inflation. We just want to talk about just the mentality we have when we look at something and think, oh, this was $5 a few months ago. Why is it $10 today?
Well, and that's actually an interesting concept that came up in this book, the concept in behavioral economics called anchoring, which is our tendency to judge what something should cost in our mind based on a previous instance or experience of what that price would be. So if I'm walking into the grocery store and I'm expecting bread to cost me XYZ and it's 10 times that, okay, maybe not 10 times, but it sure feels like that some days, then I will have this feeling that this is actually really expensive. So think of anchoring just as the way we judge if something is what we consider to be or perceive to be fair value or not. And inflation is a challenge because we have this natural tendency to go back to a point in time where things cost what we originally experienced them costing. And this is why Cam and I joke all the time about how when we started driving, cost of gas was 60 cents. And hasn't been 60 cents for a while, hey?
Yeah, and this inflation talk can catch up because one year your budget is doing great, but then all of a sudden you have to make all kinds of adjustments to it, and a lot of people don't actually go out and make the adjustments to their budget and just try and just make that dollar stretch a little bit further. And what really starts to happen is you just start to feel worse about yourself.
Well, and budgeting is so important because it shows us where our dollar can go for us, right? And it gives us this ability to make these decision points, these course corrections along the way. But you're absolutely right, Cam. The budget we made last year, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter anymore because even if inflation is quote unquote tamed, really the floor of what things has cost now is higher. Right? So we're dealing with this new reality of things just plain cost more. But then we're fighting with something else. And we're fighting with a social perception that our friends, our family, the people around us, their lifestyle doesn't really seem to have changed all that much. So now we have this thing where in our minds, we're feeling like, oh my goodness, is it just me? Am I falling behind? Why can't I keep up? Where the Joneses, my neighbors, all my family, my friends, these people around me, unless we're actively having these conversations, it looks like they're doing just fine, right?
Yeah, that's a big thing when we kind of look at like economics and psychology of money. It's that measuring stick we use because it tends to generally be someone else. Someone else has this thing, someone else has this kind of disposable income, or so we can think. We don't actually look at the credit card statements, but we tend to judge ourselves against other people. And this is where a lot of people can get tripped up.
Well, and it's the accessibility of easy credit that stands in our way too, right? Like if you have a credit card already, you don't have to ask anyone's permission to use it. And you don't have to stick within any particular spending limit as long as you have the limit available within that card, right? So people in our society have started to view their credit cards as extensions of their paychecks. So if I make $3,000 in a month and I have, let's say, $1,000 cap remaining on my credit card, I'm looking at my spend as, oh, I can spend up to $4,000 and not really think about it. And I don't think that people even necessarily take that extra step of saying, I have this money available. I think that it's more that we just don't adjust a lifestyle on the back end and we use that credit to fill the gap.
I think part of it is, well, the book goes into this, that people don't want to change their lifestyle because it feels like there is like perceived loss. There is a worsening of their life, their perceived life, their way they feel on a day-to-day basis, their ego and whatever you want to call it. People are unwilling to pull back because they just don't want to feel that sense of loss or that sense of downgrade.
Yeah. And I think that in the book, the author explained really well herd mentality in a couple different ways that I hadn't heard before. And I'd like to kind of repeat them a little bit using his examples here. Now, typically when we think about herd mentality, we think about our propensity to want to do what someone else is doing. Or we look at their life and the things that they like, and we look for things called social proof. So in the book, Dan talked about this example where if you see someone standing in line at a restaurant, you think to yourself, hey, someone likes this. This could be a good restaurant. Maybe I should try it one day. And if the next day you see two people standing there, you thought, oh my goodness, more people like this. And then over time, if the line gets longer, that's more social proof. You think, this is an experience I might enjoy. This is something I want to have. And you find yourself getting in line too.
Well, you can also look at that the opposite way too. If you go into like Costco or Walmart, another store, and the customer service aisle has just a massive long line of people bringing stuff back, it can make you question, should I be buying stuff from this place?
That's a good point, hey? But in his example in the book, he actually took this a little step further. As yes, there's social proof, and yes, there is our propensity to want to live like our neighbors, right? That concept that you can kind of judge someone's perception or perceive perceived wealth by the neighborhood they live in, the house, the size of the house, the cars they drive, all the things that don't really matter, but that we all tend to judge each other by.
Wait, are you saying that the solution to financial freedom is just to not have neighbors?
Oh my goodness. Live in the country. You've solved all your problems. That's right. Yeah, have the horses and the rabbits and all of that stuff. Not judge you on your lifestyle because, you know what, they don't drive cars and live in nice houses either.
Yes, sell your $1.5 million bungalow from the 40s that's falling apart. Go get yourself 10 acres somewhere else.
There you go. We've solved it, guys. Okay, that's it. Lights off. Let's go home. We're done. No, but let me get back to this concept of herd mentality and our innate desire, our intrinsic desire to want to do what those around us are doing. He had another example that tied this to identity that I thought was really, really interesting. And it went like this. He used the example in the book of Starbucks and this concept that Starbucks, the CEO at the time, had gone to great lengths to make this kind of like a classy place you want to be, nice pastries, high-end coffee, all of that stuff. Everybody knows Starbucks and the Starbucks story. But if you hadn't tried it before, you might see this and say, well, okay, what an interesting experience. I would like to have that experience for myself. So you find yourself going and standing in line. And if you go and you enjoy the coffee and you have a good experience, that is actually going to be used by your mind in the future to judge if you should do it again. So he used the terminology of you start to stand in line behind yourself, behind these previous experiences that you've had with a business, with an organization, with a product. So that experience then becomes something that you want to repeat. And the more positive experiences that you have, the more likely that you over time start to define yourself as the kind of person that goes to a Starbucks or makes these choices consistently.
Yeah, it's about finding that place of security, that place of comfort, that place of this is going to be the quote unquote watering hole. I've been standing in the bushes for a while. I've seen 3 or 4 wildebeest go into the water. No one's been eaten yet. So I think it might be okay. But even then, you can develop this idea, oh, I am a Starbucks person. I'm going to do this every single morning. And then something happens like, you know, entire country rises up and just frustrates all of Canada. No one wants to shop in American stores anymore. So I'll try second cup or waves.
Jeez. And that's not what the show is about today, folks. But what it is about is if you're seeing this happen, if you're seeing this persistent problem of higher costs, and if you're starting to feel strapped in your own spending, why would you not just do the logical thing and lower your consumption? Change your lifestyle expectation, change where you live, change how you commute. Why wouldn't you just take one of the quote unquote obvious answers that economics would tell us is the quote unquote right thing to do? What do you think, Cam?
Well, that would make you a very bad consumer. So you should never do that. That is a terrible thing to do because you are a consumer above all else.
Isn't that the way that businesses today would want us to think, right? That we're consumers first and everything else comes second.
You're only happy when you spend money.
But the author in the book tried to explain why changing lifestyle or downsizing is so hard. And I thought that this was really cleverly done as well. And it's kind of intuitive if you think about it. And it's a perceived loss. Anything that we feel like we're taking away from ourselves or anything that we had prior that we're now saying, okay, prices have gone up. It's harder for me to achieve the same thing that I had before. That's actually a point of pain. And it's built into us to want to avoid pain at all costs, to avoid anything that makes us feel that unpleasant sensation of, oh my goodness, I'm not keeping up. I'm not meeting my social expectations. I'm not in line with who I believe myself to be in terms of the things that I should have. And we happen to live in a society that decides and puts so much value on ownership of things, even if it's just ownership of an idea or a concept or something that we believe in, that we then say, this is part of who I am and this is something I want to stay consistent to.
Well, yeah, and because people want to avoid pain, they will just go into debt. They will just essentially just defer the problem to another day. I don't want to feel bad today. I'll feel bad tomorrow, maybe the day after that, or a week after that, or a month after that. But it is just that innate sense to, I just don't want to feel worse about myself. I work hard. I make my money. I should be able to do what I want. And if I have to pull back my lifestyle a bit, then there's that growing, gnawing sense of this just isn't good enough. And just that's where problems start to creep up, especially with debt.
Cue the existential crisis, right? But no, it does trigger a whole bunch of other things. Like you said, this idea of maybe I'm not doing this right. Maybe I'm not keeping up. But maybe the deck really has been stacked against us. And maybe it really is a lot harder than it had been in the past to get ahead. And I really like how the author had defined procrastination. He said procrastination is from the word Latin pro, meaning for, and eras meaning tomorrow. So if you look at the actual structure of the word procrastination, you're basically saying this is a problem for tomorrow. And that deferral is actually more pleasant to you because it's you're not experiencing the pain now, right? You're pushing off the problem to a later date. And that explains why people will choose spending money now to have enjoyment now versus the pain of not being able to use that money. You've deferred it to some other time, or you're putting it in a savings vehicle where you can't access it. And this whole paradox of we're always trying to enhance our lifestyle, but yet we understand rationally that we do need money to survive tomorrow when we stop working, even if that tomorrow is a number of years down the road. So what can we do about procrastination? And I thought this was a really interesting story that the author put into this book. Again, came from his time kind of playing with his MIT students. And this particular survey or exercise that he did was around deadlines. And it really, really spoke to our human nature and our own intrinsic desire to, even with the best intentions, even with the desire to get a good grade in a class at a place like MIT, we will still find ways to procrastinate. So bear with me a little bit as I kind of detail through what the experiment was and what it looked like. So he decided that for one 12-week semester, he would have 3 papers due. That was basically your grade for that semester. And he did 3 different classes, and each class had a different way of submitting their papers. In number 1, the students could choose when their paper would be due. So you had 3 papers, you can choose your own due dates, but once you did so, those due dates would be binding. So you did have to stick to them or get late paper penalties. In the second class, they could pick any deadline they wanted. And one of the students rationalized, why wouldn't we just pick the last day of class and just have everything due at the same time? Now that opens up the whole wide world for procrastination, right? Because you could technically go the whole semester without submitting a single thing and then just turn it all in the last day. Now that couldn't possibly be a recipe for disaster, now could it? And the third one was set deadlines. So no choice for the students, imposed by the teacher. You have 3 papers, they're due on day X, Y, and Z. Who do you think performed the best
in procrastinators?
In terms of the quality of the paper? And this is how it was measured. Like, who performed the best work? Was it someone that waited until the very end and tried to do it all at once? Was it someone that set their own deadlines and said, you know what, I'm taking control of my destiny here. I'm going to tell you when I'm going to do the work and I'm going to plan my own schedule. You think that would have done well, right? It didn't. It didn't do as well as someone else imposing a deadline and structure for them.
No, it takes a lot of focus and dedication and stubbornness used in a right way to actually make this work. Well, I made that work with my bachelor's degree. That's pretty much how I did. I just kind of set my own schedule. And even with my master's degree, I did my 6-month thesis in 6 weeks. But a lot of people aren't that kind of dogged, determined, stubborn, and the temptation is there to just put it off. Oh, there's just always something else that comes up. Just put it off. I should pay these bills today. Just put it off. I should make a better decision. I should just put it off. I should get this paper done. I'll do it tomorrow. Wait, you mean class is over tomorrow?
Well, yeah, but I think this speaks to, like I said, even with the best intentions, our human nature, our built-in desire to do it tomorrow, to defer it to another day. So one of the best things that you can do as it relates to your money, as it relates to your new budgeting process, because hopefully the new economy is motivation to redo the budget and take a look again at where your money is going. Imposed deadlines or imposed hard stops where, yes, on this date, money is coming out of my account. automatically into my savings account. Or yes, I've got this pre-authorized thing. Yes, I've got an accountability partner. I've got my husband, my wife, a friend, someone that I'm going to talk to, and we are going to do this together so that it's not a negotiation with self anymore.
Yeah, that's a reason why like CRA has like a firm tax deadline you must pay by. Otherwise, we just defer it for year after year after year.
Can you imagine, hey, if society didn't have rules, if it didn't have these structure, these built-in points where, yes, a calendar year ends here, a tax year ends there, your corporation's year ends here. It is needed to have these limitations put, because otherwise it's that human nature that we're fighting against. So really, really interesting in your own assessment of what you can do for yourself. Having some structure built in can make all the difference in your ability to reach your own goals.
Well, another way you can look at it is just that structure is just another one of those good habits that we just don't want to talk about very often. But there's a host of other things we can do to kind of take that ownership of our own lives so we don't kind of end up in the predictably irrational bucket like some other people.
Well, and ownership is such an interesting concept, because if you kind of look through our lives, and the author made this comment as well, we tend to define ourselves by the things that we accumulate. We tend to define ourselves by the things that we own. And that's why, again, there can be pain points created when we have to give up or change a decision. So what is it about this concept where when something becomes ours, we put a higher value on it? And what is it about this concept that kind of makes us choose a little bit more wisely then, right? Because if we decide that something is not for us, well, then we kind of have closed that door and we've walked away from it. But there was actually another study done in the book where this one was a game that they had the participants play, where it was a number of doors on a computer screen, and you clicked on a door to make it bigger and to keep it. And if you didn't click on it, it would start to fade away. And the whole point of the exercise was, if you didn't give something attention, you could lose that option over time. And even when they did two versions of this, one that had a monetary value assigned to keeping as many doors as possible, so keeping your quote unquote options open, but there was also another version of it where there was no monetary value assigned. So in this instance, there would be really no downside to letting something, an option, disappear. But the
Are you saying then that they were just playing Deal or No Deal at the expense of the university?
It could be. They created a whole other simulation to play Deal or No Deal. No. But the point of the exercise...
What's in the box?
The point of the exercise is that people would fight to keep their options available, even when it economically was not in their best interest to do so. And I mean, look at like modern day dating, right? I mean, this is what is plaguing our society right now. There is so much choice available that people are literally starving themselves because they don't want to settle in and make a bad decision. And it's this concept that if something is very, very similar to something else, you actually have a harder time choosing it, because again, you don't want to quote unquote be wrong, even if the worst decision you can make is not making a decision at all because of lost opportunity cost.
Yeah, and this can compound to like where you go to school, what kind of job you get, what kind of car you buy, what kind of interchangeable item are you going to buy this week. It is just that plethora of choice, and just at every single point, you do not want the nexus of probabilities to be diminished in your life. You just always want to have all those choices at the same time without having to actually commit to one of them and buying one. So you just keep talking about buying it endlessly. You don't actually go out and buy it
until you buy it, and then you've committed to it, and then it's harder to change your mind. Once you've made that decision, it's harder to reverse that decision. So that is like the sunk cost fallacy, right? Like this concept that the more you put into something, the harder it is to remove yourself from that situation, because now your buy-in has become personal. It's become something that is tied intrinsically to you.
Or just assume that the one you chose is the superior one, despite evidence contraries, because you chose this one. This has to be the absolute best. I've seen enough people almost have fistfights over Chevy and Ford and the like.
Well, and like you said, and like it was said in this book as well, we place higher value on things that we choose to own versus what someone else might assign value to, right? Like if you buy a house, suddenly you think it's worth XYZ more, even though fair market value might say something otherwise, because it was a major purchase and you're emotionally tied to your ownership decision to have that thing in your life.
The house is more valuable because I'm in it.
That is a very healthy self-esteem. There you go. Hey. Well, and conversely, just really quickly, he had a whole bunch of studies in there about the power of free, this concept that marketers use all the time to make something so powerfully attractive to people by saying you can have it for free. And like I said at the beginning of the show, part of this is because with our natural human propensity to avoid risk, avoid loss, anything that's free comes with a zero risk proposition. You can't lose anything if you haven't invested anything into it. And then there was this cool example that he had in the book, and I think this will be the last one we'll do in the show before we wrap it up, where he was selling on campus, quote unquote, Lindt chocolates, which I think we're all familiar with, at 15 cents versus Hershey's Kisses at 1 cent. And 73% of the people that participated in this preferred the Lindt. So they would rather pay 15 cents for that chocolate versus a Hershey's Kiss for 1 cent. And I mean, the Lindt chocolate is the superior chocolate in this context.
I don't know. It's actually on record in court that a lot of that stuff is just marketing BS and it's just regular chocolate, according to the lawyers.
But it tastes really good. Well, no, but then he did a 1 cent reduction on both. So the Lindt is now 14 cents and the Hershey's Kiss is free. What do you think people did? The statistics flipped. 69% wanted the Hershey's Kiss and only 31% wanted the Lindt. The chocolates are the same. Economics would say the value was decreased by the same amount. Like what happened here? What changed? Value proposition is exactly the same. This is still a Lindt chocolate. This is still a Hershey's Kiss. The price reduction reduced the risk of being unhappy with your choice to basically zero. So people were pulled in by this, and they were pulled in by, I can just take it and it's mine and I don't have to give anything for it. There was a huge, powerful psychology behind that.
And if you don't believe it, just think back to when you used to do trick-or-treating or when your kids go trick-or-treating and all those subpar candies that you would never buy otherwise are just now suddenly in front of you and you will eat it because it was freely given to you.
Well, and that's getting smaller and smaller every year because shrinkflation is real, friends. It really is real. So all of this today is to kind of sum up this concept, which I'm kind of getting into now about behavioral economics and this idea that even though we're really smart people, sometimes the decisions that we make aren't necessarily in line with what logically might be the best or the most economic or the most, sensical choice. But if we are predictable in our thought process, if we are, as a society, as humans, predictable in our ability to make consistent choices, whether they benefit or not, understanding that predictability can actually help us see our own motivations and hopefully, I don't know if it actually works this way or not, make better choices. And if you're looking for someone to help you with the accountability that's needed for structure, for creating that structure in your life where you're more likely to stick with a plan, stick with a deadline, and you're looking at your money and you're like, I need some help. And if you're in one of the provinces that we do business, please feel free to find us at braunfinancial.com. Until next time, take care.
And all the best at being irresponsible.